Hey kids, welcome back to Rob's Guide to SimCity 4. Those of you who follow this channel will know that I am a big fan of the network add-on mod. It's one of the most amazing mods ever created for any video game, and it's one of the things that makes SimCity 4 still a great game to play in 2020. Many of you have asked for this in the comments, and here it is, the network add-on mod for beginners. Before we get started, just a quick news item. I now have a Patreon account. A great way to get your SimCity up and running is some low-wealth residential housing, and this channel is no different. So if you'd like to contribute a small amount of money to Rob's Red Hotspot, follow the link in the video description. If not, that's okay too. Just remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Now back to the fun part. This tutorial is a beginner's guide. It would be impossible to cover every feature of this mod in one video, so I'm going to try and explain the most important aspects of the NAM interface and the terminology used in the mod's tooltips so that you can start to explore and take advantage of as many features as possible. More experienced SC4 players should also find it useful to review key points, but you can skip ahead using the video chapters in the progress bar below or timestamps in the video description at any time. I have an install guide for the latest versions of the mod, version 37 or more likely version 38. The install process is identical for both versions, and that's up on the channel. I'm recording this video on my secondary computer, so the only other mods I have installed are those listed in the 8 essential mods, bug fixes, and tools video. So if you'd like to work with an identical setup to mine, I'll post links to those tutorials in the description as well. So what is the network add-on mod? Its most obvious function is that it adds new types of transportation to SimCity 4. It also makes changes to the game under the hood that fix traffic simulator bugs and allow the player to build larger cities with more complex transportation networks. Another thing it changes is some of the user interface, mostly to give you more detailed data views for transportation. An important thing to keep in mind with the network add-on mod as well is that this mod has been in development for a long time, almost as long as the game has been out, so well over a decade. So it combines a series of sub-mods, some of which actually predate the network add-on mod. It combines them all in one convenient place. Things like the street add-on mod, the network widening mods, the real highway mods, the real railway mod, etc, etc, etc. Some of you guys have been asking questions about the traffic simulator. The traffic simulator configuration tool will be in your NAM setup folder. So when you download the NAM and you unzip the folder before you install it, it'll be in here. Once you've installed the network add-on mod, you can go into the traffic simulator configuration tool, and this is where you open it. It's TSCT, it's a jar file. I have talked about this a bit in my installation guide, but I want to just reiterate it here. When you first load up the traffic simulator, it will ask you essentially to locate the traffic simulator within your NAM file, so that's within your games installed files. So it's going to be in Documents, SimCity 4, Plugins, Network Add-on Mods, and this 8_ traffic simulator. So just point it to that folder, and then you'll be able to make changes here. The most important things to select, in my opinion, I like to use medium-high for mass transit usage, but it's entirely a matter of preference. It depends what kind of city you want to build. You can also use custom, and you can set it up yourself, although I would not advise that for beginning users. And my recommendation is that you set the base network capacity to Ultra. Classic is like what SimCity is like out of the box, and the only reason that SimCity has such low traffic capacities is because when they were testing the game when it first came out and people were running on like Pentium 2 computers, the traffic simulator settings were essentially causing the game to slow down a whole bunch. So on a modern computer, I would select Ultra. If you set it to a lower setting than Ultra, you'll have things like a city of 6,000, 10,000, 20,000 people having severe traffic problems, even though you have fairly high capacity roads. So I think Ultra is the most realistic, but it's entirely up to preference. You've also got these data view options here. I quite like them. So like this one shows the subway lines and props and zone views. You can turn that off if you don't like it. And there's other data view options here. So hit save, it'll say file successfully written, you hit OK, and then you can launch the game normally with your preferred settings. I just want to give a quick heads up for first timers. I highly advise that you start in a new city for the first time. Pick a large tile. It doesn't have to be empty like this tile, but I'm just going to do that for example. And I suggest you put it on easy mode just so that you get to know the mod. If you do want to work in an existing city, give yourself lots of space to work. Don't work in a congested area. Make sure you've got lots of money because you're likely going to make mistakes and end up deleting things and having to restart things and stuff like that. So you can always use the cheat console with Control X to get more money if you need to practice. Also, you should start simple. Start with straight lines. Some of the more complicated networks are going to be a lot harder to work with. So start with a handful of networks. Use straight lines. Later on, as you get more skilled, you'll be able to use like fractional angles and diagonals and multi-layered networks and stuff like that. But start simple and work your way up until work your way up to more complex networks as you get more comfortable with it. So to start out, I'd like to talk about what I would call the building blocks of the network add-on mod. This is going to be sort of a glossary of terms. It's going to help you navigate the network add-on mod menus, and it's going to help you in particular read and interpret the tooltips in those menus and in that interface. So the first couple of terms I want to look at is the difference between a puzzle piece and a draggable or flex network. So puzzle pieces you plop kind of like you would plop a building in the game, whereas the draggable networks you drag very much like you drag the transportation roads and avenues and stuff in the vanilla game. And some pieces, some configurations are draggable, others will require puzzle pieces, often for things like overpasses and just sort of more complicated multi-layered networks and stuff. One thing to note about draggable pieces is that there are often patterns that will allow you to produce certain results. So for example, with the streets, if I drag a pattern like this, it will automatically create diagonal streets. One thing to note about all of these different kinds of pieces is to cycle through them, to cycle through different pieces, you're going to use the tab key. And a lot of them have a lot of different pieces. So as you're cycling through, it's going to help you if you're able to use Shift Tab to go backwards, so forward, backwards. People who use Steam will know that that Shift Tab is the hotkey to bring up the Steam overlay, so make sure to disable the Steam overlay in the Steam properties menu. The other thing you can do, you cycle through them with Tab, and you can rotate the pieces with Home and End. So some of you might be using laptops. You might want to get an external keyboard with a Home and End key. My laptop actually has them. But it is going to be, you are going to need to have access to the home and end key, but that's true for vanilla SimCity 4 as well. Flex pieces can be placed overlapping your existing NAM networks. So for example, this piece, if I place it normally, it's going to be a 2-lane highway, RHW2. If I overlap it over this 4-lane highway, it automatically conforms. So that's a flex piece. A lot of the draggable pieces require what are called starter pieces, and you'll see in these menus a number of starter pieces. So for example, here we have the starter pieces for the network widening mod. The way a starter piece works is you plop it down, and then you grab the appropriate network type, in this case it's roads, and you drag over it, and that transforms where I would normally drag a road and get like a 2-lane road. This one here is one of the network widening mod ones, which is a 3-lane road with a turning lane. And there are lots of other, for example, here's the street add-on mod. If I take a street and drag it over the starter piece, it transforms it into the network, into this nice herringbone street that's included in the street add-on mod. Another good type of puzzle piece to know about is a transition piece. Transition pieces are, operate as you might imagine, and they kind of behave like starter pieces as well. So here I've got the regular Maxis 2-lane road, and I've transitioned it to the network widening mod's 3-lane road. And there are transition pieces for the highway pieces, there are transition pieces for the rail pieces, etc., etc., etc. Another acronym that you're going to see in these menus is FAN, F-A-N, which stands for Fractionally Angled Networks. As most of you will know, SimCity 4 it works on an orthogonal grid, where you can either build these straight streets, or you can build like diagonal streets. Fractional angled networks essentially cut across these at a fractional angle, allowing you to really customize your roads and streets. And there are fractional angled variants of many of the puzzle pieces and of many of the NAM puzzle pieces. It allows you to make more interesting and varied roads. You've also got wide radius curves for various network types. SimCity 4 basically allows you to make this sort of very tight curve. That's the default curve that it uses. Doesn't really allow for too much in the way of more gradual curves. Some of these wider angled curves are actually sort of automatically generated as you drag around. But for many of them, you're going to use a puzzle piece, and then you can see, for example, for roads, here are a variety of options in terms of different kinds of curves. There's a nice wide one. A little chicane for the different network types. Next up, and this is a very important one, the hole digger and razor lots. They're fairly simple, but I think it's pretty important for me to explain them. So you can see here, here's a good example of a tooltip. Razor piece 15 meters, rotate for digger pieces. And if we press tab, we go to the 7.5 meter, and there's a whole bunch of other heights here. So let's do a 7.5 meter, for example. And that's a razor, and if I hit the end key, I get a digger. For 15 meters, you can see that it digs even deeper or raises even higher. These are very useful for creating bridges, and there are plenty of reasons why they're useful. One thing I would note is that most of the network add-on mod elevated networks, like your elevated road viaducts, you're going to see they're going to use either 7.5 meter or 15 meter increments, which are also referred to as L1 or L2 in a lot of the highway ones. Level 1 is 7.5 meters, and level 2 is an increase of 15 meters. Like as I showed you in the diggers, there are also things like 8 meters and 12 meters, and I know Americans use feet and inches and yards and other medieval measurements, but basically meters are like feet for people with a high school education. Kind of related to the hole diggers and razors, there are a few kind of hacks you can use to level the terrain. The terrain leveling tools that SimCity provides you with are kind of not very precise. Like, it's very hard to tell. I mean, they can make some nice rolling hills and stuff when you're actually drawing your terrain, but for the purpose of building transportation networks, they're not very precise. So obviously, if you want to level a large area, a large flat area, you can use the basic vanilla flattening tool like that. But if you want to do something like create, say, a trench for rail, you can start by grabbing a digger tool. Let's just go down to 7.5 meters. So we'll take the whole digger piece, click there. And if you want to level terrain, if I run a street or rail over that, it's probably just going to flatten it out, right? So if I want to level the terrain, one of the best ways to level terrain evenly is to drop individual tiles of street next to one another. This is advantageous because it's very cheap, and they also don't automatically connect together. So it allows me to make a long, straight area. This is very useful for bridges as well, and you can use it for raising or lowering. So there I've made a nice level trench. A nice level 7.5 meter trench. This is particularly useful when you're using overpasses, for example, which is a big part of the network add-on mod. So here I can pick the 7.5 meter elevated road viaducts. I can drop this puzzle piece down here over the rail. And you see I've got a number of options here. And this highlights another term that's really important, and that's on slope. When you see that a puzzle piece is on slope, it means it's going to create something like this. Right? That's on slope. It means that the road stays perfectly level despite the sloping terrain here. It's designed for use on slopes. Whereas if you use a piece like, say, this one, it creates this kind of weird, ugly mess, right? This one would be useful if you were making an overpass on level terrain where there isn't a slope. And so by using the hole raisers and hole diggers, you can make your networks look more like this and less like that. Another useful trick related to terrain. So let's actually raise some terrain now, so I can demonstrate that you can use the streets to do the same thing. Level it out like that. Another useful hack in terms of terrain is the rail, where they're now using the real railway mod as the default rail in SimCity 4. If you want to get the vanilla rail back, you can select that option in the installer. But another useful trick here is that we can actually use rail to smooth out terrain. See, it's made a nice smooth curve. So this is very useful for things like the approaches to bridges. And you can see it's actually leveling the terrain as we go here. The rail that is now used in the network add-on mob is a little bit less flexible than vanilla rail in terms of being able to do like really dramatic curves, but it makes everything it does make things look nicer, and it's a much higher texture rail. And a little bit more realistic too in terms of the curves and stuff like that. Another acronym you're going to see in these interfaces is FLUPs, which stands for Flexible Underpasses. Flexible underpasses allow you to pass one network type under another. One good thing to note when you're dealing with flexible underpasses is you're going to see where I've now hovering this piece over the rail. You're going to see a little red line, and that indicates the direction of traffic. If I rotate it like this, it means it's running parallel to the rail. And you can see there's various diagonal options there as well. And that one goes under the rail. If you need to double check, because now it's invisible, of course, because it's underground. If you need to double check that it's going in the right direction, hover over it with the query, and you'll get this little bright pink kind of red texture that's telling you that there is a FLUP there. And here we can see that there's a FLUP the whole length of this, and we know that road is going to work. And when we use the data mode here, we'll be able to see that there's traffic on those streets. One other really important piece is the disconnector piece, which you find in the highway menu here. The disconnector piece allows you to disconnect just one tile. Whereas if you use the bulldozer, you end up with something like that. So the disconnector piece is really good for fixing small mistakes without necessarily, if you have a very complicated interchange, it sort of becomes like a house of cards. If you use the bulldozer in the wrong spot, you can break the whole thing and have to start again from scratch, whereas the disconnector can allow you to fix small errors without necessarily having to completely start again from scratch.
So understanding these building blocks of the network add-on mod should help new users navigate the menus and tooltips, making it easier to find the network types or puzzle piece that you're looking for. All this might seem overwhelming though. Just remember, you don't have to use the network add-on mod networks to take advantage of this mod. In my opinion, the most important part of the network add-on mod is not that it allows you to build 16 different types of highway, it's actually that it fixes a lot of the bugs in the traffic simulator, allows you to build bigger cities, and gives you more control over the traffic volume on various network types. Even if you only want to use the basic vanilla transportation methods, you're still taking advantage of the mod, and it's still entirely worth it to have it installed. For those of you who want to experiment with some of the new network types made available by this mod, I'm going to go through some fairly simple tricks and network designs that will make a big difference for your city without requiring any transportation brain surgery. So first up, I want to talk about draggable and ploppable roundabouts. Roundabouts are a fantastic way to reduce traffic because intersections have a lot of traffic, and roundabouts keep traffic moving in a more fluid way. Unless, of course, you live in the United States, in which case, when you hit a roundabout, you usually stop and hesitate for about, I don't know, 2 minutes, and then all of the advantage of the roundabout is lost. However, there's a few different types of roundabouts, some of which are ploppable and some of which are drag patterns. In the network add-on mod 38, we've got these really cool single tile roundabouts, and these work for when you have 3 streets, 3 roads intersecting like this. So that's really cool. It allows you to connect 3 streets like that basically without a traffic light. So it keeps traffic moving smoother. There's a variant of this one as well. It's down here, by the way. It's this one here. You can sort of see the image. It says single tile roundabouts, and I can tab through. And there's one that has a street connecting to 2 roads, and there's one that is just roads. And I can rotate these with the N key. If you want something a little bit more versatile, what you can do, and this is a drag pattern that's introduced by the network add-on mod, you go to grab the vanilla one-way roads, and depending on which way the traffic is moving in your game, I use the North American, so traffic in the right lane. Drag a circle like this with the one-way roads, and that gives you a simple roundabout like that, which I can then connect either roads or streets to. This takes up a little bit more space than a classic intersection crossing, but it looks really nice. It keeps traffic moving smoothly, and you can do things like drop a bus station or a park or whatever you like in the central tile, which I find looks quite nice. These ones are actually fairly flexible. You are able to use like diagonal streets like this, so they're also fairly flexible for creating crossings for streets that are maybe coming from different angles. And once again, that's just the one-way road, the standard one-way road, and it's a drag pattern in a circle. Finally, for roundabouts, we have these the avenue intersections here, and these are really useful. The basic avenue roundabout here, if you read the tooltip, it's telling you that there is actually a built-in flexible underpass, which is really cool if you have like a double-decker network going on or something like that. Most of the time, though, I just use these as faster intersections. These ones basically work best with vanilla avenues, so I can connect avenues like this. Once again, that's in the street menu here under avenue intersections. The interesting thing about these ones too is that you can actually delete. This is the flexible underpass with a little statue and pawn there, but if you delete that, you can put in like a park or a transit station or whatever makes sense. So these are quite nice. They kind of spruce up your city and they keep traffic moving faster. Next, I want to talk about some simple transitions, and some of these are basically built into the vanilla game, but the network add-on mod gives them a lot more flexibility. We know, for example, that we can take an avenue and connect it to a road like that, and you see the avenue narrows and it becomes a 2-lane road with 1 lane in each direction versus the avenue with 2 lanes in each direction and the grass median. We can also, though, split an avenue into one-way roads like this. And you might ask, what's the point? Well, first of all, this allows me to, if I want to separate these lanes, this allows me to have the avenue split like that, and it'll allow the same volume of traffic to flow. So depending on if you need more space for your networks maybe here, it's a good trick. It's also going to open up other possibilities, though. It's a good thing to get used to doing. So we take the avenue like this, we take the one way like that, and like that, and we can clearly see there's a slight texture change that indicates that we've gone from avenue to one way. This is also going to allow you, if you do start to work with the real highway pieces. Now if we grab the starter pieces, this is the RHW 4, so 4 lane in total, 2 lanes on each side starter piece. And you can see that we can actually connect these up to the one-way network. So this is a pretty useful sort of multi-stage transition that will allow you to, for example, transition an avenue into real highway. Could do the same thing here. Could grab the... So just to reiterate how I did that, we're going to go into the highway menu here. We're going to click Real Highway Starter Pieces. Easy to see, it's got the little yellow thing that says Starters. Okay, and now I'm just going to use, for this example, I'm just going to use the basic RHW 4 ground level starter piece. Can drop it there. Keep in mind that the yellow line indicates the central section of the highway. So if this might be confusing if you're not if you drive on the left side, like if you're from the UK or something like that, and there's sort of nothing I can do to demonstrate that because I can't set this all up for the UK or for other places in the world that drive on the left side. But basically the yellow lane is in the center. So to your left if you drive on the right side. So that's just a good visual cue to keep in mind. And so I drop it down there, I rotate it until this yellow lane is in the right place. Then I grab the RHW2 tool here, which is your basic draggable for the real highway, and I drag over that starter piece. And there we go. So now I've turned this avenue into a real highway. So it's a fairly smooth way to connect things up. Those transitions are useful to know. I'll talk a little bit more about the real highway mod in a second. For now I want to show you another really simple trick. So let's say you have a street grid. It's not a very nice street grid, I know, but I'm just doing it quickly to show you. And you have rail going through your street grid. If you just use the vanilla kind of dragging method, you're going to end up with a lot of level crossings. So there's a few different ways that you can get rid of level crossings using some of the most simple network add-on mod tools. So the simplest way to do it is to go into the road menu and scroll down to road overpasses. Now you're going to want to read the tooltip carefully here. So it says road over road, and we hit tab, road over rail. So road over rail is the second one. Now we see we can't place it with the roads already in place. So we're just going to delete these roads here. Give ourselves a little bit of space. Now we hit tab to go back to road over rail, and we see right away we're able to create that overpass. That's going to get rid of the level crossings, which is going to speed up your rail and road. Basically another way to create less intersections. And it also looks nice to have the rail running level. The other way you can do this is let's just give ourselves some space there again. You can go down to the FLUPs. Rotate this one. Notice that the FLUPs, the same, so if you go down to, in the road tool, you click FLUPs. The very first tool is ramp for underground road. And we notice that if we rotate this, we also go through one-ways. So in this case, I'm just going to use road, but you can also do it for one-way. Just make sure that you don't place the wrong network type as you're rotating it. It cycles through them all. We can just connect this up here. And now we're going to go back to the FLUP menu. So right down here, FLUPs. Okay, and now we're going to cycle through. We're going to see that there's also a FLUP for avenues. So if you can do the exact same thing with avenues. And a number of other network types. You can do the same thing for streets. And now it's really important here that you read the tooltips. Diagonal, underground route, under straight roads, under streets, under one-way. You just cycle through these until you find under rail. Now we see diagonal, underground route, under straight rail. And remember, you're looking at that red, that thick red line there that's telling you which direction the underground route is running. So it says straight underground route, perpendicular under straight rail, which is a little bit of a mouthful to understand, but if you look at the red line here, it will help you. It'll be a lot easier. And there we go, we've completed a FLUP. You can do the same thing. You can do the same thing for a road that runs under another road, or any number of underpasses, as you can see here. The third way that we can eliminate a level crossing is with a rail viaduct. These take a little bit more space. So I'm just going to delete this road altogether and give ourselves lots of space. You might be able to fit it in a tighter space, but we're going to start with that. Let's also delete this tile. So I'm going to delete that tile and just reconnect this road here. And we can actually delete. So we can delete this rail here, just to give ourselves lots of space to work with. In fact, I'll go right back to there. And we can go in here. We don't want the Onslope ones, because this is flat terrain. And I'm going to place this. Usually it's best with these to leave at least one tile space on either side of a puzzle piece like this. Like that. You might be able to do it tighter though. We're going to connect this up on either end. And there we go. We can look at this from the side. We can look at this from the side and see that it's actually a nice gradual climb, fairly realistic. It's not too harsh. Okay, so now we have those are three different types of crossings that remove level crossings and allow your train traffic to run independently of your road traffic. You can do the same thing with rail, by the way. You can create rail viaducts over rail that allows you to keep, for example, keep your freight rail separate from your passenger rail, so that can be an interesting idea as well. The next super useful thing, and this is probably one of the easiest things for people who are just starting out with the network add-on mod, is multi-modal transit stations. In vanilla SimCity 4, most transit stations only serve like one purpose. So you can see this is like the vanilla elevated rail station. Well, it only does elevated rail. You've got the vanilla bus stop that only does bus, and the vanilla subway stop, which only does subway. Well, there's a whole bunch of stations down here. I want to show you two of them that are the most useful. First of all, you can see the vanilla elevated rail station here, but if you scroll down just a bit, you have an identical station that says elevated rail, bus, and subway. If you're building elevated rail at all, I highly recommend using these stations. They're going to make your network more future-proof, and they also mean that you do not have to place a separate bus station beside it. So it saves you a lot of space. And if you eventually are going to be adding subway connections, then it's already set up to do that. Very, very useful. If we query it here, we see that it provides for light rail, elevator rail is referred to as light rail, bus stops, and subway stations. Super, super useful. Looks identical to the vanilla elevated rail station. There are a few other options, but I just wanted to show you the simplest one. Next up, we have a pair of stations which are probably, in my opinion, the most useful stations in the entire network add-on mod, and are dead easy to use. The Ninja Boulevard Kiosk and the Ninja Boulevard Station. Let's take a look at the larger Ninja Boulevard Station. The Ninja Boulevard Station is a train station. It has a parking lot. It has buses, and it has subway access. The Boulevard Kiosk is a smaller version of the same station with a slightly lower capacity, which would allow you to run rail, which, as long as it's adjacent to rail, it functions as a train station. As you can see here, it functions as a train station. It also functions as a bus station, and potentially as a subway station. So this is a fantastically useful station. And I would recommend, I mean, they're a bit more expensive than bus stops, so if you don't have mass transit in your city, you can use the regular bus stops. But as soon as you start to put subways and rail and stuff like that, I would recommend upgrading your most important bus stations to these Ninja Boulevard kiosks. Very, very simple. Even if you're not using any of the advanced transportation features of the Network Addon mod, you should use this station. Next, I want to show you guys a very simple real highway interchange. We're going to go through a few of the basics of the real highway here as well. So, as I mentioned before, real highway draggable networks use the RHW road type here, which is draggable more or less like a regular. It kind of looks almost identical to a regular SimCity 4 road. It's good to get to know a little bit of the terminology of the real highway mod here. So RHW2, the number indicates the RHW stands for real highway. The number indicates the total number of lanes. So RHW2 is 1 lane on each side of the highway for a total of 2. If we go to the starter pieces here in the highway menu, starters, we can see that there's RHW4. This is MIS. It's a single one-way lane. Then we've got RHW3, which has 2 lanes on one side and 1 lane on the other side. We've got RHW6S. Now, what does the S mean here? The S means separate, so it's meant to be used like this. You could even put it farther apart if you wanted to leave a larger median in the middle. Next up, we see we've got the 6C. So the 6C builds both sides of the highway simultaneously. And we can drag like that. So it's a 3-tile network that where both sides are joined in the middle. 6C stands for combined, S stands for separate. I'm not sure if that's what the intended abbreviation is, but that's what I use to remember. 6C. Similarly, we have 8S, 8C. This is 7C, which is 3 lanes on one side, 4 lanes on the other. 10S, which is 5 lanes in separate sides. You can see here that this takes up, each of these take up 2. And then we get into the elevated variants. RHW4, elevated 1, and this is also level 1, which is once again is 7.5 meters. And then we get to elevated level 2. And elevated level 3. Etc., etc., etc. Okay, next, let's make a simple real highway exit system. First of all, you can see I've got a couple bumps left over on the train here from an earlier experiment. So a good first step is to take the leveling tool and make sure everything's perfectly level. If the terrain is very uneven, you might want to use the street tool to do that. Let's start by dragging our real highway. So we're going to go to the starter piece, and we're going to grab, zoom right in so you guys can see. We're going to grab RHW4, put the lanes in the right way so the yellow lane goes in the middle of the highway, in the inside of the highway. We're going to grab the RHW2 piece, which is what we use to drag over the starter, and we can see that as we drag over the starter piece, it creates the 2 sides of this 2-lane highway. You can do this with larger highways as well, following a similar method, but I'm just going to use the easiest one for this demonstration. Since this is a beginner's guide, let's give ourselves a nice long stretch of highway. Like I said, you always want to work with lots of space, especially when you're a beginner. Making tighter configurations is going to be more challenging. Next, let's create the road overpass. We're just going to do a simple elevated road overpass. You can use a variety of network types for this, though. Let's start by grabbing the draggable elevated road viaducts piece from the road menu here. And we're just going to rotate this piece and place it immediately adjacent to the highway on either side. It's the first piece in the menu. And then we'll grab our roads, we'll drag over this. You can see that it creates a simple overpass. Next, we're going to go grab the disconnector piece. And we're going to disconnect these two so that we use as least space possible. So So we've just got the basic crossing there. Next, we're going to go into the road menu, and we're going to go down to the digger pieces. And we're going to use a 7.5 meter razor. We're going to count 1, 2, leave enough space here so that we don't screw anything up. We'll do that. 1, 2, 3, like that. And now we can go back to the elevated road viaducts. This time we're actually going to use the non-draggable one. So 7.5 meter ERD. These are puzzle pieces. And we're going to cycle through until we find an Onslope one. Here's the Onslope piece. We're going to rotate it. This works very similar to FLUP. So we've got a straight road Onslope puzzle piece. Drop it there. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side here. Okay. We can grab this piece again just to start at the beginning of the queue here. 7.5 elevated road viaducts. Once again, here we've got road over blank terrain. And that puzzle piece fits nicely in there. Has a nice little support as well. Now we can grab the roads here. We'll just make a nice long road running straight to keep it simple. On either side. Like that. This is not the only way to do this, by the way, but this is one way that I find fairly simple and foolproof if you follow these exact steps. Give ourselves lots of space. Lots of space on either side to fit the ramps. And now we're going to connect it up to the ramps. So for the ramps, we're going to go in the highway menu here, and we're going to go to flex ramps. Flex ramps are fairly simple to use. Now, you can see that the A1 type ramp has the exit lane. This exit lane here is running parallel to the highway, so we don't want that one. Let's go to B1, which gives us a wider turn. And we might be able to fit it there, but let's give ourselves a little bit more space, like so. And we'll just make it directly opposite on the other side. Now let's just rotate this around. You can see that there's like 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we want everything to be nice and symmetrical, we can count the number of tiles. And we're going to rotate it around again. Find the configuration that we want. Keep in mind that if you're having trouble placing it, move your cursor around. Go back. And there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks good. And then we'll go on the opposite side here. Rotate around. There we go. And that should be symmetrical. Now these MIS lanes, we can just double check and make sure that the yellow line is on the inside. You can see that's on the inside. And we can now go grab in the highway menu the RHW2, and we can drag this out like that. Next we can cross over like so. Okay, and that creates an intersection with the road, so that's how you get on and off the highway. Do the same thing on the other side here. And we'll do the same thing over here. Be a little bit careful how you drag. You can see that if I don't drag on exactly the right tiles, it can end up making a mess. There we go. So that's a very simple real highway interchange. So I'm not going to do any more for this video because it's getting kind of long. I do want to reiterate though that if you don't want to go to the trouble of using these real highway pieces and some of the more complex pieces in the network add-on mod, you really can just use the Maxis, some of the Maxis pieces and some of the Maxis pieces which will benefit from the network add-on mod's changes under the hood. So if I wanted to do the same thing in a little bit of a simpler way, I would just take the ground level highway and then take ground level overpass on-ramp and do that. So for those of you who just want to use the network add-on mod for its bug fixes and to make the traffic simulator more robust, this is perfectly fine too. You can also connect if you run into trouble and you're having trouble with the real highway mod and you just want to go back to using Maxis Highway for certain more complicated things. A good thing to know is that RHW 4 connects up quite nicely to the Maxis Highway. So if you run into trouble and you just want to kind of use the easier, simpler Maxis Highway, you can see here that the Maxis Highway connects up fairly smoothly to RHW 4. I just want to say a few things in closing before I end this video. So first of all, remember that there are many ways to solve one problem in the network Addon mod. So even for this very simple interchange system, there's probably 3 or 4 other ways to do it. And I'm sure that some of the more experienced viewers will be watching this and be like, no, that's not how you should do it. And like, everyone has their own way to do it. So you can experiment with different methods and use the one that you prefer. The other thing that I would say is that oftentimes when you run into a problem, one of the ways you can solve it is by trying things in a different order. So if we're doing that very simple flexible underpass with road under rail, you might want to try laying the rail first, you might want to try laying the road first. Try things in different orders, and sometimes puzzle pieces will play more nicely together if you do one network before the other, and vice versa. Another really important thing, and I've mentioned this several times, but I'll reiterate it now, especially when you're using more complicated pieces, is read the tooltip. So I know that this tooltip, for example, is a bit of a mouthful to read, but if you're having trouble, read the tooltip, get to know the different acronyms. So if you know what RHW8SL0 is, you're going to have an easier time figuring out where you can place this flex ramp, for example. Last but not least, if you get stuck on something and you're trying to do a particularly complicated thing, the best thing you can do is to take a screenshot and post something on the Simtropolis forum. The Simtropolis forum is the best place to get detailed information for the more complex things that you might be trying to do in the network Addon mod. So I'll do more videos on specific transportation networks in the network Addon mod in coming weeks and months. Let me know if I missed anything, and as always, feel free to ask questions in the comments. If a few people ask about a specific problem, I might just make a video on it. Also, once again, if you want to contribute to Robjet Hotspot, the best way is to follow the Patreon link in the video description, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.